Yo, 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 yo. Hi, what's good, people? So this is another British invasion. It's been a while since the last one, but anime, what's good, Nathaniel? Good to see you, brother. Um, Before I bring Zarina up, I just want to contextualize a little bit what's happening here. So, this channel, first of all, shout out to Jacob, who's given me access to all of this and allowed me to be able to host conversations. Um, in terms of what I've been doing, what British invasion is, you can blame what's good, Jacob. You did actually. Unfortunately, you led the British on your channel, so um, yeah, just gonna play this little clip that sort of sums up what's happening.
You're in London itself, and you're personable enough to do like, I can leave my apartment,
How's
ha
the
ha
audio?
ha, you incels, and like show us what's out there in the world, and bring that to us. I think, dude, because we're blind that we can see what Twitter shows us. Well, it depends, because if you're in London itself and you're personable enough to do like, I can leave my apartment, ha ha ha, you incels, and like show us what's out there in the world and bring that to us. I think, dude, we because
Uh, yeah, so I completely agree with that sentiment. My mission statement from the general was to go into London and come back and show what I've got. And I've been attending Speaker's Corner for a while now. And Zarina is one of the staples at Speaker's Corner. And she's been waiting patiently, so I'm gonna bring her up and let's get going. The numbers went up quick still. Hey Zarina,
Hey, Taylor. Thank you for having me.
thank you for making time. I started panicking a little bit when I got a single tick on WhatsApp, like, oh, are we gonna have to reschedule? But thankfully,
Oh yeah, no, I'm sorry. I should have said yes. Still good, wasn't I? I totally get that. Like if you plan something and then you get worried, thinking, "Crap, what if the other person isn't coming?" But no,
yeah,
yeah, no, I
especially
had
when
it.
I didn't. It's not like I checked in like a half an hour before. I just yeah. Anyway, I'm glad you're here. Um,
Yay.
so you're speaker school, we better speaker school now. You've been attending there for how long?
I think about 3 months now.
Yeah. Oh, really? I thought you've been there longer than that.
Maybe 3.5 months since end of April, like May, June, July. Oh, I guess yeah. I guess about almost 4 months now. Then wow, time really does
Yeah.
fly.
Yeah. So just a little quick bio. Uh, Zarina is a novelist, a musician, a YouTuber. I'll put a link to her channel and websites in the chat. Um, as I said, our paths crossed at Speaker's Corner, where she talks about the failings of feminism and why it should be replaced with women advocacy. Uh, no one likes to be put in a box, but I'm gonna do it anyway. In my brain, the box Zarina occupies is anti-feminist. However, I think she's a little bit more nuanced than some of the other ones. Uh, yeah. So, was that an accurate representation of what you present online?
I think so. Yeah.
Huh? 10 marks for me. So on this channel, this space I'm on right now, it's called the Little Corner, and it's sort of like a ritual to introduce someone to the Little Corner by asking them about their story and get to know a little bit about them before we get into the ideas that they're bringing to the table. So, were you born and raised in London?
Yeah.
And I think for the ideas you're going to present, it's important to highlight how old you are as well. Sure, you're not new to this.
I'm 26.
26, born and raised in London. And did you grow up in a two-parent household?
Yeah.
Siblings?
I've got one brother and one sister. My sister's on my dad's side, and she lives in Germany.
And where do you fall in the order?
So sister was dad's from dad's first marriage, but she's like a bit older than us. She's like in her late 30s. And yeah, I've got, so with me and my brother, I'm older. He's 2 years younger.
Oh, did you grow up in a religious household?
No.
And if you were to sum up your coming of age story as a piece of media, book, film, song, what comes to mind and why so? If not, you can just tell us the story and we'll try to come up with a song or a film that fits it.
I'm not very good at being concise, Teo.
Let's
So,
go, Zarina. We're on YouTube. There's no time restriction.
well, okay. So I was born and raised in London. My dad is Tanzanian. My mom is, I say she's British born Indian. The reason I say this is because she's Indian, but she's not. She was born and raised in Britain. So she comes from an Indian family, but I wouldn't say like a traditional Indian family, more like a
Right.
very, very British Indian family. And my dad is, yeah, born and raised in Tanzania, very, very proud Tanzanian. And I describe our upbringing as pretty happy. We had a pretty nice childhood. So it was us and then me and my brother. We've always been very, very close. Um, we were always kind of involved in creative projects from a young age. So we used to do things like music, dance, drama, acting. And I always loved to write stories from a young age as well. That was always something I loved to do. And so, yeah, writing, playing music, being creative, that's always been a huge part of my life, really. I mean, keep on going.
Okay, so what was school like for you? Did
I
you
didn't
like
really
it?
enjoy
Did you take to
school.
it?
No, I found school, I didn't really enjoy school. I was bullied a lot in primary school. It was quite hard. I was picked on a lot for like a good, we'll say about 7 years. So that was quite difficult, but because I have quite a good family, that kind of helped me a lot. Secondary school was okay. I had friends there. I was kind of a bit known because I used to do like YouTube skits, especially towards the end of secondary school, and because I used to do music stuff as well, so people kind of knew me from that. Yeah, I've been doing YouTube for like a long time. I mean, I'm not like known on YouTube or anything, but I've been making videos like for about 11 years. So since I was in my mid-teens, I used to do like comedy stuff and comedy skits. I had this channel, I made up a name for myself. I called myself Zarina. I used to do like these funny skits and play
Like
guitar and just all kinds of funny things, really. Sorry.
in the vein of someone like Miranda? Is it Miranda? Miranda? Someone. And
You could
there was
say
another
that.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose so. But yeah, yeah, and then sixth form, I found very, very stressful because there was a lot of like academic pressure. I think I put a lot of pressure on myself to be very, very high achieving. But yeah, I did pretty well. I did film studies, history, and psychology for A levels. I did pretty well in them. And then I actually went to university twice. So I went to the University of York first, and I was doing philosophy, but I didn't really do much work because I had kind of an alcohol problem that started before I went to university because I was really, I'd say between like 2013 and 2013, I think 2013 to 2016 were very, very, very difficult years for me. Like emotionally, I had a lot of problems with like depression and alcohol problems. And also during that time period as well, my parents are separated now. My parents' marriage has started to disintegrate. So there were a lot of like difficulties there. But yeah, I would say that so I went to University of York and then I left after a few months and later that year went to the Academy of Contemporary Music doing music-based degree. So yeah, my life has been a bit messy. But
Those
who doesn't, right?
those 3 years between was it 2013, 2016. How did you what was the rock bottom? How did you just climb out of it? What was the process? What was that process like?
I mean, it all feels like a bit of a blur now, but to make a long story short, I struggled a lot with like depression, self-harming, suicidal thoughts. I had a lot of these like difficulties. I think a lot of young people go through this, especially in this day and age. and it was
Was
quite
that
difficult.
something that you was that some sorry to interrupt, was that something that you were sharing with your friends, or did you not have
Not
close
really,
enough
no.
friends?
No, I had friends, but I didn't really like to talk about those things. I just kind of keep them bottled up. But yeah, I did have these kind of struggles and some struggles with anger problems as well, which I think you and I touched on a phone call. But I wouldn't say I think the anger problems were the result of depression, like repressed rage. I think a lot of that just came from being bullied a lot as a kid, and probably as well because of my parents' marriage kind of breaking down. So it caused a lot of like emotional and psychological difficulties. And I was kind of using alcohol as a way to cope, which was obviously very unhealthy. And I don't know, at the time it all felt really, 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 really hopeless, but I always kind of pushed through because I always thought I want to be somebody in life and I don't just want to be dead at 18 kind of thing. So that would have been a big waste. Yeah.
So it was like the fear of not making something of yourself dragged you out of it.
Yeah, because I've always wanted to do something in life. I always hate the idea of being useless. I think that it's important to have a purpose and be driven. That's always something I've really cared about a lot. And that has always really helped to push me, really helped to keep me going, helped to keep me pushed through, these because times can get very hard. I think life is fundamentally very difficult. There's a lot of hard things. I've gone through a few hardships recently, as you obviously know, well, the internet knows, but people don't really see what's going on behind the scenes. People kind of just see what's in front of them, but don't actually see everything that's going on behind them. I think a lot of people can be very, 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 very cruel. Like it shocks me a little bit recently, especially the past several months. I feel like I've gotten a taste of how cruel people can be. And I think that if it wasn't for the fact that I went through a lot of emotional difficulties in my teens and learned how to handle myself emotionally, I think that I wouldn't really have the resilience to deal with some of the kind of ways that people can be really cruel to other people. And that's why I always try to make my whole thing like one of the speakers corner, I'm always talking about we need equality between men and women. I've always seen well, not always, but see feminism, like the last recent years I've been really studying feminism and studying it more and see it as a very mean spirited movement. I think people use feminism and these kind of woke ideologies to really make fun of people and put people down, which is quite sad and quite dangerous. So, yeah, that's kind of why I do what I do, really.
Yeah, the next question was going to be how has feminism impacted your life? Because that's something that you're known for at Speakers Corner. It's something that you've dedicated a channel to. And when did that start, and how did you get into this?
So when I was a teenager, when I was in sixth form, I was actually part of the feminist society. I actually identified as a feminist, I say from the age of about 14 till 18. Because I always thought feminism was really about, girl power, empowering women. I used to think like, I think this actually used to make me really, really depressed as well. Because I used to think, oh, has always been so much harder for women. Women couldn't vote. Women didn't have careers. Women didn't have opportunities. Like, that's why when I hear all of the feminist propaganda, I know it's all bullshit because I used to think like that. I used to think, oh, life has always been hard for women. Women have always had it so much harder. And then I actually realized that actually this is almost making me like really, really almost like hate being a woman, like almost really hateful and really, really upset. I mean, I was never like a radical feminist. I was never like, I never believed that I was never anti-men, never, because I've always, been really close with my dad and my brother. It's just that I always thought feminism was actually a very pro-women, empowering women thing. And I kind of realized, oh, feminism is really just something that women use to crap all over men and also to kind of blame, like, play the victim and say, oh, women have always had it harder, life sucks for women. And I think it was around 2016 actually. There was a lot of this kind of stuff going on the internet about like a lot of feminists saying things like, oh, we need to ban the word bossy. And there was Emma Watson with the whole like he for she movement, right? And you had this very like internet pop feminism. And it was all just so cringed. I remember looking at it thinking, no, I don't this is so stupid. Like, in today's society, like women have so many opportunities. Life is so great, like well, so great, but women have a lot of opportunities. And I always thought that feminism had always like been the reason for women having opportunities. When I would actually look into things and start to research, like for example, the pill, a lot of people will say, oh yeah, the pill is thanks to feminism. But then you look it up and it's like, no, the pill was invented by men. It was nothing to do with
I,
feminism.
before we get to the pill, because that's something that I've also got some thoughts on. I just want to pull back a little bit to
It's just an
something you said.
example.
Something you said earlier about depression and the nihilism caused by the ideology of feminism that preaches that woe is a woman and men have it easier. Uh, is that something that you went to? That's something you saw other feminists were going through, and you can trace their depression and a lot of that nihilism through to the ideology.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, I'm not saying I was depressed because of that. As I said, my depression was caused by other
Yeah,
things, but that definitely did bring me down a lot. You know, there is that sense of woe is me. It's so hard being a woman. And it's funny because if you read articles about feminists talking about this, there is this very, very like sad, I'm so miserable and life sucks for me kind of mentality. And I really have seen that. And that is something which, I've seen, and I think that this is really why I think this is probably one of the reasons now why I'm so anti-feminism, because I think feminism really brings women down, and that's why I say I'm a women's advocate. I think we should be bringing women up. And it's like the feminists will always say, oh, women never had any opportunities. But it's like, that isn't true at all. Women have had so many opportunities. Women have always been able to work. Women have always been able to have careers. Women have always had their place in society. It's not like women have always been undervalued or been second class
but
citizens.
it is
And
true
that's
that
what
it's
annoys me
always
so
been
much.
hard.
But it's been hard for everybody. That's what I say, is that it's been hard for women. It's also been hard for men. And what feminists try to do is they try and paint women's suffering and women's pain as somehow more apparent than men's suffering. And it's really kind of prioritizing one sex over the other. I would really say that feminism is really a kind of gynocentric female supremacist movement rooted in misandry. It's really a misandric movement. It's all about claiming victimhood for women and claiming men are oppressing women and anything they say or do. And yeah, no, that's a really good point the gentleman just made about, male suicides. I mean, there are so many men's issues that are just not addressed, that are just not cared about, thanks to feminism and thanks to the harm. And that's why I just think feminism is just so bad, really. It's like I think I went from being kind of a moderate feminist to, not really agreeing with feminism to being like super, super, super anti-feminist. And now I just think feminism is so awful. That's why I say feminism is trash, because it is trash. It's just an awful, awful ideology, and it does people a terrible disservice. It really is just turning women and men against each other, really.
Okay. So mostly a lot of the comments are agreeing with you. Preach sister, shout to Ezzy. Good to see you, bro. Um, there is a. I want to play the devil's advocate for a little bit, just a little bit.
Oh
Don't
yeah.
don't get off me. There is a need for, like you said, it's been hard for everyone, and when things are hard, you need something to believe in. You were, let's say, strong enough that you were able to say, okay, I don't want to make something of myself, so I just don't want to, decay away. That's not something that a lot of people have. That's something that usually it's formed by either some kind of ideology. It could be a religion. For most of the world, it's been religion, but in a modern context, people are searching for something to hold on to, and it seems to me that most people just find an ideology that gives them uh, make sense of the woe is me that everyone faces. That there needs to be something that makes sense of it. Now, I agree with you that pointing the finger at men and saying they're the reason for the woe is me, that's not correct. But we have to point to something, don't we?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's really unhealthy so I don't know if you've heard of something known as like the difference between actually locus of control. That's a really good thing to use. So I don't know if you've heard of a locus of control. So
I
the
feel
locus
like
of
I've heard
control.
of it from you. I
So
know
locus of
other video
control.
you made for your manifesto.
So locus of control is basically about where what I was going to say is like the difference between having a growth mindset and a victim mindset. And your locus of control is basically about how much you think that you are in control of your life. And people who have an internal locus of control tend to be more thinking that they're the ones who can influence their life, and it's like it's about me and my decisions and what I choose to do. Whereas people with an external locus of control will blame external factors a lot more. And I think what's really quite dangerous about these ideologies, like especially the feminism and the cultural Marxism, the trans ideology, all of the woke ideologies, they're really negating the power that we have that comes from within, and they're trying to now turn around and blame everything on the outside. Now, I obviously agree that there are external circumstances that we cannot control, but I actually think it's much. If you look at people who are really successful in the world, they always go through hardships, right? Like Maya Angelou, I'm just looking, I have one of her books on my shelf. You know, she had such a hard life. Oprah Winfrey, like most people who become very, very, very successful go through hardships and pain. It's impossible to become successful in life without going through pain. This is just a part of life. And in Alcoholics Anonymous, which I was in for a while, they say, you know, pain is inevitable, misery is optional. And if you don't go through pain, if you don't endure suffering, if you don't learn to kind of overcome struggles, then you are just going to become very, very weak. And you are going to have this very victim mindset. You're just going to think, I'm a victim. My life is terrible. And, you know, we cannot just, first of all, the problems, like if we say, okay, what about external factors? What I usually say is that most of the problems usually come from politicians, media, elites, but not from men. And what feminists, their fundamental thing is that men are the
But
problem.
those like the feminist argument would be those people those quotes you just made, they're mainly men, aren't they? Is that not?
Yeah, but if they're mainly men, then why aren't they passing legislation that helps to benefit men? Like, why are they passing legislation that is negating fathers' custody rights, that is negating male homelessness, male suicide? Why are they not passing legislation that is actually benefiting men? And that's what's so stupid. Like, if we live in this male-dominated patriarchy, why do we need men's rights activism? Why are there all of these problems facing men that are not being addressed, that feminists completely ignore? And you know, it's just ridiculous, isn't it? Because feminists, I do think that people like to have a scapegoat. They like to say, oh, this is the problem, that's the problem. And again,
Do we not
like
need a
we are,
scapegoat?
sorry.
Do we not need a scapegoat?
Well, a scapegoat isn't, you know, I don't know about a scapegoat so much as a like actual reason. Like, for example, the political system in the West is extremely corrupt. We don't really live in a real democracy. I think everyone knows that, or everyone might know that.
Name one that's not corrupt. I'm Nigerian, so I know about corrupt political governments. Name
Of
one
course
that
you do.
isn't corrupt.
Well, I mean, I don't know a whole lot about the current state of the world, but I mean, there's got to be countries like, for example, well, I don't know if this is too controversial to say, but I think Putin, for example, like people like say Putin's an arsehole, but he's just trying to.
Wait. Of
What
all the
did he
names
say?
you could have come up with, it's the man that just took out the guy that tried to coup yesterday. Didn't he assassinate? Yeah, Putin, that's the non-corrupt.
Well, no,
He
what
just
I was trying to
assassinated.
say is that
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll let you land, but that's fine.
no,
But
the
Putin,
point I was trying to make is that Putin is you could say he's a man who's trying to defend his country, right? He's trying to protect his national sovereignty interests. National sovereignty interests. Now, I'm not saying he's good or bad. I'm just saying that he's for his country, right? He's for Russia.
okay.
Or the same
Yeah.
with, say, in France, Marine Le Pen, like in what was it, like over a month ago or whatever, when there was a Paris attacks, Marine Le Pen was standing up for a country. And so politicians are supposed to stand up for their country. And it seems that a lot of politicians who try and do that nowadays are just called fascists, when most of them are not fascists. I mean, fascism itself came from, you know, Italy, like Mussolini and all that. But, you
I missed
know,
this, but I want you to get a chance to respond to it. So David said, so most women I know are pretty feminist. How would you go about talking to them about it? Seems really hard to get through to them because I'm a guy. How does a
are
guy?
they pretty feminists, or are they pretty feminists?
David, confirm below.
I've had people ask me this. Actually, somebody emailed me about this a while ago.
Yeah,
It's
pretty
really, really
feminist.
hard because I think a lot of men are just really being ignored right now. And because a lot of women, first of all, a lot of people don't understand feminism. I know we're going to talk about Idiot Pearl at some point, but she, for me, well, I was making a video, but I'm going to be making videos about her all next week,
let's get
and we're
into
going
it
to talk
now.
about her
So
at some point. We're going to go.
you
Well, let's not go too much now, but I was saying like her, for example, because we'll finish this whole thing first. She doesn't really understand feminism, and she is helping to push a narrative because a lot of people don't understand feminism. A lot of people think, first of all, a lot of people think either feminism is about women having equal rights, or they think feminism is about women being able to make choices. This is wrong. These premises come from classical liberalism. And this is a big misconception I used to have because when I was younger, I identified as a liberal feminist until I realized that actually feminism is so much more than simply saying women can have choice, women can have equal rights. And the people who helped me understand feminism for what it is are radical feminists. Now, I personally say radical feminists are actual feminists. I would say radical feminists and intersectional feminists, but intersectional feminism is kind of an offshoot of radical feminism in a way. They both use they're both rooted in that market-based
how is
defense
that? That's the classification I struggle with. That sounds to me like the other end, just saying each group, taking the worst of each group as a representation of the group. You can do that
It's
for
not
any
the
group.
worst of each group because if you look at, for example, feminist academics, especially from the second wave feminists, people like Kate Millett, Gloria Steinem, Andrea Dworkin, Betty Friedan, one of the most famous or most well-known English feminists right now, Julie Bindel, who I've met twice. To me, these are real feminists because feminism, what they will say is very clear. To me, two key premises of feminism are women are oppressed by patriarchal society and gender roles are an oppressive social construct. And these are really the two things that people need to keep coming back to. And the reason why it's dangerous to ignore this is because when you say feminism just means women can have choice and women can have equal rights, first of all, it sounds funny, but you're making it harder for the actual feminists who are trying to make a point because it is still their movement, right? Like they have the movement, they wrote the theory, we need to be intellectually honest about the movement. And also, it means that people think, oh, anything I do today is a feminist action. So if I go out to the shop, if I, as a woman, decide to go and get an education, that makes me a feminist. It doesn't. And when people think that, they think that, oh, basically any woman having agency and choice makes her a feminist. And it doesn't. So a lot of women who say that they're feminists, they're not really feminists. They just think being a feminist means being able to have choices and have equal opportunities. And this is really, really not true at all. It's something known as choice feminism, which has been really, really, really criticized. And it's ridiculous because choice feminism negates patriarchy theory, which is a key facet of feminism. To be a feminist, you have to believe in that women are oppressed by a patriarchy. You have to believe that women are systemically disadvantaged, that women face gender-based oppression, that women are fundamentally oppressed by men. If you believe this, then you can't go wrong. But if you believe, no, it's just equality and equal rights, you're not really a feminist. And because as well, most feminists who say they're feminists, in my experience, even if they're not radical feminists, they will still frame society as women have harder lives. And this is a thing I remember actually last time I was at Speaker's Corner. I think I talked about this. There was a lady I talked about this with on camera, and there were two women afterwards, and it got so frustrating because like they kept on saying, "Oh, but women this, women that, women that." And what I'm trying to say is, you keep on looking at it as only women. And what I keep on saying is, we have to be looking at women and men together. We cannot look at a society where we frame women and men, where we make it women versus men. We end up distorting gender relations and creating contention and antagonism. And we also end up negating male struggles because we end up prioritizing women's struggles over men's struggles rather than looking at them equally. And people who believe in real equality between the sexes are basically trying to say that we need to be looking at men just as much as we need to be looking at women. We need to look at, we look at female domestic violence, we need to look at male domestic violence. We look at female suicide rates, we need to look at male suicide rates. Female homelessness, male homelessness. We cannot just negate that because women and men are supposed to go together. We're not like, I don't even think women and men are separate, really. For me, this is a really strange concept. We're not really separate. We're both here. Like, there's a reason why it's a man and a woman. There's a reason why you have a mother and a father, because the woman and the man are supposed to go together. And the feminism has created this division and this rift between the woman and the man, which I think is really, 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 really messed up.
Okay, so I almost completely agree with you. But I think that story needs to be the story you've just told needs to be rooted in something. Because clearly, don't know if we'll get probably get to the trans later, but the women and just womanhood and male being a male is in question. Like biology is not answering the question that the trans are posing because quite frankly it doesn't make sense. Yet you can't ignore that that's where we're at now. And I think to we need with the male and female gender needs a mythos to stand upon. Now, I'm Christian, so it's very easy for me to just point to Genesis and say, let's go the Adam and Eve, blah blah blah. But also can't ignore the fact that that story isn't resonating the way it once did in the culture. So I think that there needs to be a story that we all need a story that we tell ourselves about why we do what we do. Now, for feminists, I think you're completely right. The patriarchy is the core tenets of their faith, to put it that way. There needs to be this is what we're fighting. This is who's against us, and all our actions can be justified because we're fighting this big bad wolf called the patriarchy. I think a lot of oh, sorry, I'm ignoring. I wanted to bring this up really quickly because that is something I've heard you debate at Speakers Corner quite a bit, talking about in the intersection of feminism is Marxist feminism, oppressor slash oppressed, and yeah, I've heard you debate a young Marxist multiple times at Speakers Corner, which is very entertaining.
Go with the shirt, right? Yeah, cool fellow.
Yeah, so as I was saying, there needs to be a mythos that makes sense of what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman. Do you agree with that, or do you think biology is enough and we can just count on science
I
to
was going to
to
say,
do
yeah, we
anything?
have evolutionary biology because obviously not everybody. The problem as well with religion is that not everyone. First of all, there's what like thousands of different religions, but I often say this as well. Like most religions say male and female, right? Like especially the old religions. Like the pre-Abrahamic religions, the kind of one was called pagan religions, like Celtic faith, the Norse faith, the Egyptian faith, like all of them had male and female deities, the male gods, the female gods. And this is something which means a lot to me. Because it's something which is often negated by the Abrahamic religions. Goddesses were a huge part of basically all the pre-Abrahamic faiths. I know Hinduism, for example, as well. They have female goddesses, and it's a big part of it. And they have any Hindus watching can correct me on this if I'm a bit wrong, but from what I understand, you have the Shiv Shakti, and it's like the Shiva and Shakti go together, and the Shiv represents the male, and Shakti represents the female. And it's this whole thing of like, there's even images of like it's almost like the man and the woman is together. They're not divided. So, but because obviously we are living in a very secular time period, we're not really living in an age of faith or spirituality so much. I actually don't think this is a good thing. But this is the reality. And I think that actually, just to kind of cover everybody's basis, using evolutionary biology is enough because, evolutionary biologists would say male, female, correct. And the trans gender fluidity
So
stuff
my
is
my
not
my
biological.
my argument, not so much an argument, but what I'm pointing at is evolutionary biology is a myth that we're pointing to. What we're dealing with in this culture was I see as competing myths. Now, the same way you said that Abrahamic religions, the myths isn't, it's not believable to people. Even evolutionary biology is not believable to people. Matt's Daily Wyman did a documentary about it. There are scientists, quote unquote professors, looking in the camera and saying, "Nope, evolutionary biology does not define male and female." So even that mythos is failing. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think that's probably the easiest mythos, for want of a better word, to use because it's the most objective. I mean, I'm not against, well, Abrahamic religions, I have my views on them, but at the end of the day, people have the right to practice their faiths. But the reason why I say evolutionary biology is because that's kind of something everyone kind of agree on because religion is subjective
It's
and
not.
science
I'm saying
tries to
that's
be
not something
objective.
everyone agrees on anymore. That maybe that was true. Let's say 20 years ago. I'm saying in
Well,
2023, that is not something everyone,
I
not
think that's
even
largely because of the cultural Marxist indoctrination in universities and schools, which Jordan Peterson's talked about a lot,
speak
a
on
lot,
that.
a lot. And well, for example, there's a lady that I have a lot of respect for called Dr. Deborah So, and she is a sexologist. I think she was kicked out of academia or whatever, basically because she was fighting against a lot of the gender social constructionist stuff. And in her book, The End of Gender, she talks about, the biological origins of gender. There's another biologist as well called Luann Brizardine. She has two books called The Male Brain and The Female Brain. And most of the pushback faced from these people are coming from either feminists or people with a more kind of cultural Marxist worldview. And they're kind of pushing back on this because they're basically trying to say that if you think like this, you're a bigot. So I think that actually it's not so much that people don't agree with like biology, it's that the kind of socio-political indoctrination that's being pushed into these spaces is kind of negating the biological realities to push a political agenda. Like, for example, the trans ideology is a political agenda. And I'm not talking about, a very, 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 very small minority of people who suffer from gender dysphoria and feel like having a sex change is the best course of action for them. We may all agree or not disagree, but at the end of that's fine. I'm talking about the trans, because a lot of people don't understand this as well. Like the difference between they don't see that like this stuff these are political ideologies, like the transgender ideology, or even like the LGBT ideology. Like there's gay rights, which is we should support homosexual marriage and all that, fine, normal. And then there's the LGBT ideology. And for me, it's quite hilarious because, like, for example, some of my fiction. Oh yeah, God, I feel like I've gone into this now. Do you want me like to talk more about myself, or we'll come back round to that?
No, 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 no. We'll come back. We'll come back to
Yeah.
your music, your book,
So
and all that.
yeah, like I've always been very, very supportive and pro like gay rights, and I've always had like homosexual or bisexual friends. I'm not against any of this stuff, but it's like even people in that space have had enough. Like I know there's a kind of a well-known YouTuber called Ariel Scarcella. She's a lesbian, and she has really, really spoken up a lot about the trans stuff, and she's gotten a lot of crap for that. And she's not the only
Yeah,
one. Like even trans YouTubers
there's a drift,
themselves.
isn't there, between I feel like older trans are less okay with a lot of what the movement is about now, and
Yeah.
the younger generations are more the one that are pushing the envelope.
Absolutely. Like there's a lot of like adult trans YouTubers, especially old school trans. Like I know one of the most famous ones is Buck Angel, and he's really spoken about this. Um, I mean, the trans thing is so complicated. I used to be a lot more like, oh, what will be thing towards it. But as I've started to see it more and more as like a really concerning, because I'm just looking at it as like how it's being pushed more and more and more into society and how it is really causing these problems.
Especially on children.
How you can't talk about it. Sorry?
I said, especially on children.
Yeah, it's all.
It's
Well, the end result, I
it's a
think.
trend.
Sorry?
There's a trend amongst teens and preteens who are seeking, at that age, everyone plays with identity. You try to be your favorite footballer. You try to play football like a footballer. You try to you've got a singer, rap, someone that you're emulating. I feel like that's normal for normal play. It's more normal for children to play with identity. But when the identity they're playing with is not being affirmed by a medical procedure, I think that should be alarming for everyone. No matter how you're pro-trans, anti-trans, doesn't matter. If when children are being mutilated, I think that should be a concern for society.
No, I completely agree, and I do think, and I've heard a lot of people say this, that the kind of end results of a lot of this stuff does seem to be normalizing pedophilia. Like that's where a lot of this stuff is heading. I think anything which is kind of leading towards that it's just like just disaster. You know what I mean? Because it's like that's what people don't really seem to be seeing as well. Like, we have now, we're saying, okay, it's okay for children to just be gender confused. And then what's going to happen, as we start to go more and more and more and more with that, we're going to end up with the normalization of pedophilia. And it's just so dangerous because it's like, no, it's like, what? So I just think it's all just been a mess. I mean, for me, it's shocking just seeing how society has fallen down. I mean, that's where my novel Tic Tac Toe, which I'm sure we'll touch on, was really about, because I was so shocked. Like I think it was even like 5 years ago, like 2018 when I started it. And I was just like shocked at how, you can't say anything now. You can't say that there's male and female. It's this pronouns thing as well. And it's like people aren't seeing the wider ramification of this on society. They're not seeing where this is slowly heading and how we are all heading down this very, very, very slippery slope. And it is
When,
very,
when
very
you say
dangerous.
when you say it's all heading towards pedophilia, are you saying it's all heading towards the normalization of pedophilia or the
Yeah, that's what
encouragement
I mean. Yeah, like I think that is the direction. Because I've discussed this with many people, and that's what a lot of people seem to be saying. And I actually think there's a lot of credit to that. Like, because first of all, I mean, I'm guessing you've seen What Is a Woman? Most people, because
well, I saw it when they put it on Twitter. Yeah.
yeah. So he he's going to these places, right? And you have these people basically just casually saying, "Oh yeah, girls can be boys, boys can be girls," and they're being so calm about it, like it just doesn't mean anything. But actually, like we all know, this is really, really quite sick. And as you're saying, it's kind of it sounds like in the old days, but like 15 years ago, a young boy who was more feminine was more feminine. And Deborah So actually in the End she says how typically what she thinks is that people are almost conflating being gay with being trans. So she was saying how usually effeminate boys are usually gay and effeminate and masculine girls are usually lesbians, and people are not really recognizing that at all. They're not really seeing that, how a lot of these kind of things, that's how it is really. And they just think now, oh, the boy can just become a girl, the girl can just become a boy. And this is just so worrying because it's like trying to put again, it's a political agenda really. And I just see it all of it as the end result, this destruction of humanity and like this transhumanist bullshit. That's really what I see. Well, that's why I see where it's
And no, I'm currently listening to what I've been reading and listening to for a while now. Mary Arrington's Feminism Against Progress, and she makes a similar argument. She sorry, let me before I do, I'm a bad YouTuber. Let me get through some comments. And so Nathaniel says, Karen A. Force, we are choosing to define feminism as a perspective or way to approach the world in which individuals try to understand, critique, and transform practices of domination, especially those that involve gender. Simple and true, we are on the same side against sin and death. And Dan Smith said, if they claim gender is a social construct, how is gender affirming surgery affirming? That's actually a good point. That's a good question. And Santo Anthony says, moralizing totalitarianism. Yes, secular humanism is a disaster. Do you agree with that? I don't think you will.
no, I don't know. It depends. Oh, this sounds suddenly gone funny. Oh, okay, it's gone normal now. Yeah, secular humanism is quite a nice, shall I say, idea, because it attempts to be, what's the word, universal, because it attempts to bring, everything together. But I don't know. I don't know how to go into that because that just feels like
I think this is a great question. Could you name some positive female role models that embody your ideal motion of the feminine?
one of my favorites has always been Marilyn Monroe, and I know some people might have, but I know she's very, you could say, idealized. But what I really like about Marilyn Monroe is that she was feminine and very soft and gentle, very elegant, but she was also she was like sexy without being vulgar and without being crass. And she wasn't you think of how like sexuality, she was kind of embracing her sexuality, but she wasn't in this like really, really horrible vulgar way. And she was a career woman. She was a woman who worked really hard, became an actress. She was also one of the first women in Hollywood to own her own production company, which a lot of people don't know. And
I did not know that.
No. She was also extremely intelligent as well. Like, because a lot of people just thought she was some dumb bimbo, but she wasn't at all. She was actually extremely intelligent. I mean, she was married to Arthur Miller at one point. He was a playwright. Like, so, yeah. For me, I always, quite liked her. Somebody else, J.K. Rowling. For me, I think she's, for me, I have a lot of respect for her because she, again, she went through a very, very difficult circumstances. And the fact that she went through these hard circumstances and was able to achieve that level of success. Sorry, my lighting on my phone is kind of going in and out, so it's like making my eyes appear duller and brighter in case I look like
I
I'm
didn't
high.
notice.
No, I can notice because it does that with the light sometimes. But yeah, so J.K. Rowling,
Are you listening to the Trial of J.K. Rowling podcast?
No, it doesn't interest me at all. I think
Oh,
everyone's
okay.
just being horrible to her at this point. I mean, I just think it's awful what she's had to go through the last 3 years. It's absolutely awful. It's bullying. It's just bullying. That's all it is. It's crapping on her for no reason. She has done, for me, she's done literally nothing wrong. It's funny as well because she'd actually say she's a feminist, and there's a lot of things she said I don't agree with, but the fact that I have a lot of respect for her as a writer because I know that she went through a lot to come, and the fact that she obtained such a high level of success as an author for me has always been very inspiring. And Harry Potter is amazing. I love Harry Potter. I think I watched like the 6th movie or so the other day. And
Which of the 4 houses would you say you're in?
Full Houses, Ravenclaw. I think I actually did a test. I got Gryffindor, but I think I'm Ravenclaw.
I think
Ravenclaw
that
is like,
test is rigged for most people to get Gryffindor. I know a lot of
yeah.
people doing that test. I got Gryffindor.
Yeah, I think I am, based on my personality, I say I'm Ravenclaw because Ravenclaw is all about like wit, brains. Um, that's like, yeah, it's really like the brainy house, you could say. It's like Ravenclaw is about, brains. Gryffindor's bravery. Slytherin is kind of like power and cunningness and secrecy. And then Hufflepuff is like kindness. Like all of the houses represent different archetypes, don't they? Which house are you? Hufflepuff.
I think.
Yeah, I don't know why I got that.
From the explanation, I'll take it.
Hufflepuff was the first one that came to mind, actually. I thought Hufflepuff was Slytherin. Slytherin gets a really bad rap. Like in the books,
I was gonna say Slytherin just for jokes, but if you also thought it, I think it might be Slytherin. We've got
I think
an
maybe you're
agreement.
more Hufflepuff-ish than Slytherin. Because Hufflepuff is kind of, the more gentle, quiet.
Let's be real. I'm probably in Azkaban somewhere. That's the most likely destination.
Yeah, but no, Slytherin gets a really bad rap. Anyway, so yeah, Marilyn Monroe, J.K. Rowling. I always think, because the person mentioned about what embodies the feminine, I always just think of the classic Hollywood, like Monroe, Rita Hayworth, Audrey Hepburn, as being quite a nice standard of like femininity because
I like the phrase you use, sexy but not vulgar. That seems to be a through line from most of the people, and also the wits with J.K. Rowling. So in terms of physically, you want the sexy but not vulgar, and then you want them to have brain about them as well. That's how you. That's how I do.
Well, that's what I try and
embody.
I'd say so, and also that's the perspective I come from on my channel because I don't really come from a like uber traditionalist perspective, but I don't agree with like vulgarity either. And there's a lot of like vulgarity that kind of being pushed onto our society and all that, which is not great. But yeah, I think that for me, like being feminine means being in tune with your feminine energy. I mean, it's a very I mean, for me, it ties in a lot as well with my like spirituality, which is again like they don't really have this so much as in the Abrahamic religions, but I know in like more like pagan ideals.
Oh yes, I was going to respond to that statement earlier. But I'm glad you brought it up again. I'm not the expert on the femininity and how that's really played up in the Abrahamic religion. I think Catholics have a much stronger theology on that because they really there's a huge emphasis on like the in the hierarchies. Mary's pretty high up in the hierarchies of the people don't want to use the right word, not worship. They do not worship Mary, but yes. Anyway, so they've got more, and they've also got female saints that I'm sure. So I think there's a it's not well understood and it's not well. The Hebraic Village haven't done a great job at you know showing off the women that are very important to the faith. But I think they are there. In terms of like my own Protestant secularism, we point a lot to Ruth, a lot to Mary, all of these people, just rich female characters in the Bible. And I think that's in just reading it as a story, the Bible does female characters way more justice than Hollywood does or any other media form because it truly embodies the feminine. It's life giving, but also you've got strong. Yeah, so I think there are lots of strong feminine characters in the Bible, just a story level. And in terms of uh, higher than that, I would speak to the Catholics. They've got much better understanding. Sorry, that's just my quick response to that.
No, I don't negate that at all. And I definitely think, that's something a lot of people don't understand, which is why it saddens me sometimes when people say, oh, Christianity is misogynistic or the Abraham. They're not misogynistic. This is they're not anti-women. My biggest problem, you probably know this, I've said this in a few videos, is this idea of like, you could say like the Madonna whore complex, because that comes a lot from religion. That's a big part of Christianity, and this whole thing of like good girls versus bad girls. And I do usually class that based on sexuality and this idea of like, if you're not like you're either like a pure virginal woman or like a whorish woman. They've got like you're either like Virgin Mary or Mary Magdalene. And I just think, I mean, if you look at society now, for example, in a lot of ways, the women, not all, or no, most of the women, but with things like OnlyFans and pornography, it is almost like women have gone from having to be overly pure and chaste to being like the whores of Babylon. And I really do see this as a big link between that and Christianity. And that's one of the things I really dislike about Christianity and how it's sort of had this division of women into good girls and bad girls based on sexuality. And I do think this is very unhealthy. And what saddens me is most of the people who talk about this are feminists. Like, I don't really see many anti-feminists. There was one lady on YouTube who I liked so much. Her name was Greta Aurora. She had red hair as well, like me. And we had basically the same views actually, because she was anti-feminism, but she was also very, very into like sensuality, and she talked a lot about goddesses. And I don't know what happened. Her channel's just not there anymore, but she had a nice channel. It was about maybe 6,000 subscribers. And I think we emailed at one point. So we're actually hoping to do a collab with her. I really liked her approach. And I don't see many anti-feminist or non-feminist women who are embodying that. I see most of them are trying to push this very
in terms of the good girl, bad girl thing that you point to, and I think you're right. A lot of it does have to do with sexuality. I mean, you made a video recently about body counts. I think that's like a contemporary discussion, but it's all about around the same thing. And what I would say to that is, pre the pill, sex was very consequential for both men and women. And post the pill, the seriousness of sex, I think culturally, especially in the West, I mean, talk to the Muslims, they'll tell you, yeah, especially in the West, sex has become just a fun thing to do, to be very honest. It's, for the most part, nowadays it's expected that if you're dating someone, sex just comes with it. Previously, that would mean that a baby was more than likely going to, at least there'll be pregnancy from it, if not a baby, because mortality of pregnancy wasn't great back then either. So sex has become less consequential, and as a result, we are a lot more blasé about it. You speak of the OnlyFans, and I think all of that plays a part in just the over sexualized nature, where it's now become vulgar in most cases. The femininity, you look at a lot of the I hate to pick on the female rappers, but a lot of them nowadays are very
Cardi B,
just sex is the forefront. They talk about their private parts just multiple times in a song, and all that vulgarity, I think, comes from the fact that sex isn't taken seriously. And I take it back to the pill. What do you make of that? Oh, also before
I
you
actually
go,
think
I
it's
just really quickly for the chat, I am gonna drop a link to the StreamYard so people can join very soon, probably around the hour mark or so.
yeah, that's cool. So I actually think that some of the hyper promiscuity is actually also a social reaction to some of the more repressive aspects of sex prior to the pill. And that's why I try and say this. And I think that it's so funny because two of the asshole YouTubers I've engaged with, they don't really seem to understand that. They don't really, like in the first stupid video when I was talking to Ali Dal and he made that awful thumbnail of me, and I was trying to say this to him and he just doesn't. He just shuts off. Like, him and Pearl as well. They're because they're pushing a narrative which is basically saying, oh, you're either no sex outside of marriage or just shag anything. And I don't like, this is not healthy. We don't need to have it either way. It doesn't need to be only sex for marriage or anyone can just shag anything. There is a healthy middle ground. And a lot of people don't know this, but there's a good book called
What
Sex
number?
at Dawn. Sorry?
What number? What
Number
number?
what?
What medical number is a good middle ground between shag
Well,
anyone and
I'm not talking about numbers. I'm talking about, because that's not really any of my business. I'm talking about
that's that's what I'm
attitude
saying.
because,
The reason
for
I asked that question
example,
was,
so
oops, sorry. Yeah, the reason I asked what number made you ask that question wasn't to just to be provocative, although a little bit of that, but to highlight the fact that if we're going to say there's a middle ground, that automatically becomes subjective, and we can't get past one side saying the less
why is
promiscuous.
it why is it anyone's business? Because, for example, so what I was trying to say is that in the ancient societies, there's a book called Sex at Dawn, which talks about how in the old like kind of old tribal societies, sex was used as a way for people to bond, and it was almost like it was almost like a way for people, they theorized that human genetics were more similar to bonobos, and promiscuity wasn't so like libertine as it is now. It was more like people use sex as a way to bond. And, it was almost like in the tribe, people would have sex with each other to as like almost like a bonding way. So it was almost like people, having sex with their friends, but it wasn't like meaningless. It was like a bonding thing. And that's what I been trying to say is like, I think we should actually, maybe if we start to see sex as a bond, then it doesn't matter. Because, for
Right,
example, if you have sex with like 10,
let me try this on you. Around just going around the bonding metaphor that you're
yeah.
going. What if there's a story in which sex is like a mini creation, a mini Big Bang, if we think of it as such, because that is, to my brain, that's where it is. That's the seriousness in which we're dealing. We're co-creators. We're small gods with a small g, and I think of sex as like an act of, yeah. That's exactly I can come to. It's that Big Bang that I think that's the seriousness that we're dealing with, and unlike the culture that we've got now, which is nowhere near what I'm saying, or nowhere near the bonding or the binding that you're proposing either. How do we get the culture to take sex more serious? What do you propose?
Well, what I was saying is like, looking for the middle ground and saying that effectively, yeah, we don't have to see sex as one or the other. We can start to change the way we view sex. And, for example, again, it's like with the whole old Hollywood women, like with Monroe, she was like sexual but not vulgar. And, when you say that somebody is either this or that, you're just pitting people against each other and you're not really having it's just like too much. Because, for example, it's just like I know this because I used to watch like a lot of atheist YouTubers. They used to say, oh, they grew up in these very repressive Christian households where they were all told no sex outside of marriage, and then they just kind of go and rebel. And that does happen a lot. People who grow up in these very sexually repressive societies. I think that's also why we are where we are now, because it's a result of some of the more sexually repressive nature. I'm not saying it was all repressive, by the way. But I actually think that I think it's a complicated topic and people are trying to simplify it. Basically, I think it's an overcomplicated topic and people try to simplify it, and it kind of annoys me when people say either, oh, it doesn't matter, everyone do what they want, or oh no, you shouldn't have sex for marriage. I just think these are actually really really stupid because, first of all, sex is very complicated. because it is
I think
it's probably one of the
I
most
do agree with
complicated
you
areas of life.
about I do agree with you about the repression. I think in I don't have the book with me, probably Manchester. Tom Holland wrote the book Dominion, where it sort of his thesis is that Christianity changed and formed the West in a truly fundamental way, and all goes back to the cross. And part of his evidence for that is the change in sexual culture. Roman sexual ethics is very different to the sexual, well, even the non-religious consider a healthy sexual ethic nowadays, and that's partly because there has been a reframing where we don't think it's okay for you to just for men add on like just powerful men had unlimited access to as much sex as they want, regardless of the age, gender. They did not care. Like they were shagging any and everything, and so the Christianity sort of tamed the male, especially not women, male sexual urges, and I think that served the West a good for a long time. And yes, I agree with you. I'm sure the repression led to some of the scandals that happened because if you're pretending not to be something in in public and you are that thing in private, there is going to be a explosion of things. So I agree
Yeah.
with you, but the I will point that more to those people are failed in their spiritual practices, and that's a consequence of that. Not that the spiritual practices is a consequence of their failings. If you get the distinction I'm trying to point at. So I think the the repression of male sexual urges by Christianity was a great thing that I think we can bring back. I mean, even secular people are now doing semen retention. That's a trendy
That's
thing
not
for.
repression, that's transmutation. Because repression is really unhealthy. Because when you try
I
and
agree.
repress something, yeah, there's a difference
I
between
agree.
repressing something and transmuting. Because, for example, like I know semen retention, no fap. I've discussed this a lot with my brother. They're not repressing their sexuality. They're effectively trying to transmute their sexual energy, and that's not the same thing. Like it's funny because you brought up Mary Harrington. There's another lady called Louise Perry who he saw me put it on her, and she talks about repression. And for me, I think this is really messed up because when you tell people to repress something, the automatic thing is it's just going to play on their mind and play on their mind and play on their mind. That's what a lot of like people, addicts, can talk about a lot. It's like if you tell yourself, don't drink, don't drink, don't drink, all you'll think about is drinking. If you tell yourself, don't shag anybody, don't shag anybody, all you'll think about is having sex, right? So people
I
forget
agree.
that. And that's why I think as well when you have these like it's almost like these kind of overly morally pious people who just want to try and like say anyone who isn't like them is dirty and unclean. I just find that really, really disgusting because it's like, what gives them the right to say somebody's full of shit? And actually, as well, you know, not everyone, not everyone views sex as a big bang. And actually, is it really fair to say, oh, people shouldn't be allowed to just have sex meaninglessly? Like, what I think is that sex should be private. I think that we have become too
Open.
it's like sex needs to be a private thing. How people choose to operate sex, it's their choice, but it should be a private thing. And with this, for example, like but with this thing, like for example, hyper because even things like pornography, like I'm not anti-pornography, but it needs to be like private. Like a lot of these things need to be more it's like everything is out in the open now. And I do think this is again a reaction to the way they were suppressed. But now we need to start to find a way to try to bring it into about
Yeah,
capitalism.
Cassandra, do
Yeah,
you
sex
think there
has
is a
definitely
relationship
become very
between?
commercialized. I mean, that's definitely a true thing. Like I do think sex has become very commercialized. I do think that sex has lost a lot of its meaning. But then again, I'm saying that, and then there'll have people turn around and say, "Well, no, actually, I think that sex is very meaningful." So that's why I keep saying this is such a complicated topic, and I don't like it when people just try and say it's this one way or that way. It's the
I
whole conservatives versus liberals, and they both just piss me off
left,
to be
right.
honest. Because
I'm with you.
I think
That we can agree on. I just want to highlight: is the sudden decline of sex among young adults in general a good thing? What would your response be to that?
Is there a sudden decline in sex in young adults, or is this
I've
just
been
a
I've been
myth?
seeing a lot of people say that. I've not looked at the research. I've not done the
I
research
don't even
myself.
think
But
that's true.
that's a
I
trending
think that's
thing
a
to do.
lie, actually. I don't think
Um,
that's true because you can't really measure that either.
I think that's probably a reflection of the people that are terminal. A lot of us are now terminally online, and I think that's a reflection of that. If that's that's what my best guess would be, but I've not looked at that.
Wait, did I
I've
look
not
better
looked into it.
before?
You look definitely better before. I don't like this. You look way too.
I look too yellow. Yeah.
Yeah,
Same thing happened last time when I was on Callison because the light's gone darker now. I've
I
got my
know.
phone lights. It makes me look
So yeah,
very
much better this
witchy.
time. That's some
um,
burning. Is there
well,
a
here's the
possibility
thing,
that
right?
some
So, for example,
desire
if somebody
and
has
tendency-
pedophilic,
is there a
well, if
possibility
somebody
that
has
some desires
pedophilic
and
tendencies, for
tendencies
example,
should be repressed and not acted on or expressed? Okay, that's the question. Go on.
yeah.
If
So
somebody has
that's interesting.
pedophilia,
Like, for example, if somebody has pedophilic desires, obviously you can say repress that, but that's not going to make them stop having those desires. So
no.
what I think is a healthier way is learning
So
to
I've heard you say this before. Okay, let's go.
actually, yeah. I think I might have said it in the Perry video, sublimination. So transmuting those desires elsewhere. And some people have actually there were some studies that were found actually that like pedophiles watching what's it called like
Animated child
cartoon,
porn.
yeah, that can actually help because instead of acting on their desires, they're sort of looking elsewhere.
No,
What do you think that's
okay.
for?
So I heard you say that in a video, and I was hoping it wouldn't come up because it makes skin crawl just thinking about. It. So I think that is a terrible, 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 terrible thing to do because one thing that is clear in the research into porn is that people get more they get sucked into you start off with something and then but if the addiction persists you end up watching things that are much darker. I think that's the point Louis Perry made in a book as well about the loop that happens in porn. So if you're gonna say you're gonna have pedophiles watch and like we're going to say it's acceptable, socially acceptable for pedophiles to watch animated child pornography. They're not fantasizing about an animated person and in
Yeah,
their
but you
deeds.
can't control people's
No,
fantasies, and
no, no, no,
also,
no.
isn't
No
that better than them?
the point is, it doesn't stay as a fantasy. It's there is a the yeah. I don't see that being anywhere. That sounds like one of
Okay,
those terrible ideas.
but then isn't that better than them going and acting on it? Because the thing is, if somebody has like a certain
I think
tendency,
they're
it's
more
not
likely
going to
to
stop.
act on it if I think we are the there are going to be more pedophiles as a result of there being or the society being liberal about animated child pornography. I think that's going to make more people feel, oh, okay, cool. Like they can start watching. You might start off not even interested in that, and then end up in some kind of porn thing where now you're watching animated and now you're fantasizing about what that could be like, and then that's the point I'm making. It
I
sounds
understand that, but what I'm saying is that isn't that better than them going and actually acting on their like desires. You know what I mean? Like, isn't that much safer? Because the problem I think as well, a lot of people don't really understand. A lot of people don't understand addiction. A lot of people don't understand addictive personalities at all, which really, really, again, is so. It just really, really gets on my nerves because everyone likes to assume that it's all straightforward, but it's not. If you tell someone, it's like if you tell an alcoholic don't drink, they're gonna drink. It's just not gonna stop. You know. I mean, I mentioned earlier how I had an alcohol problem when I was younger. I was an Alcoholics Anonymous, which was really, really good for me. And if you have obsessive or compulsive tendencies, then they're gonna like the way to overcome them is not by trying to suppress them. The way to overcome them is by working through them. I think pedophiles really what they need more than anything is help. I think they need a space where they can all go and have professional help and be in an environment because there's a lot of pedophiles who don't actually act on their tendencies. They have these thoughts, but they need help. Because a pedophile who acts on it is a criminal. A pedophile who's
that's
just got the thoughts.
that's that
But
point,
I
isn't
don't
it?
see
Like
that as repressing it. I see that as working through it. because they're
Okay, all right.
trying to gain help.
Let's stop. I think the word. I agree with you. The word repressed does imply that at some point it's gonna come out some other way. So,
Yeah,
what was the word you used?
Freud, he identified repression a lot, problem with
Trans.
repression.
What's the word you used? The really nice word instead of repression.
Transmutation, transmutation,
Transmutation.
or
Okay, so
sublimination,
that
which is yeah, not Freudian
so they
term.
can transmutating your desires into something productive is something that I think we're all an advocate for, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Uh, exercising a thing strengthens it. Starving a thing kills it. I agree with
No,
that
it doesn't. I
statement.
think a lot of these people don't really they don't really understand addictive
Addiction.
or compulsive tendencies. No, they don't. And this is why like what I can't understand. It's like it's so bad because
No, but I
people who
think
aren't like that don't understand. It's like, for example, if you think of casual sex, right? If you don't understand what it's like to have a compulsive tendencies, it's very easy to say, oh, that person is being like this. But it's like it's a really lack of understanding. And also, I was gonna say as well, like not everyone views sex in that way. For some people, they just like to have sex, and actually, I think that's their business. But as long as it
yeah.
doesn't become again, it should be like a private thing, if that makes sense. Yeah. The
Um,
way I look on my phone is really making me laugh. I feel like I look so witchy right now.
is that not on brand for you though? I forgot
Huh?
this. Is that not on brand? The witchy look.
Witchy
Sleeping.
redhead. It's like I have to sit close to the camera so I don't look like it's so dark. We're both kind of dark, so I guess I mean
Exactly.
yeah, dark.
I play into it. You keep turning the camera. I play into it. So I've put the link to the stream in the chat for the last 10 minutes because daylight is running low and we're in a different continent to most people that are watching. Um, so yeah, I wanted to get into some of the things that you've actually created because you're not just a speaker who's going to talk and the talk. You've actually walked the walk. You've written multiple books. How old were you when you wrote your first book?
My first book, do you want me to show you them or
Yeah,
maybe it's too dark?
no,
Yeah.
let's do it. You can bring it to that.
Yeah. There's so many books. I'm literally the embodiment of a poor struggling artist. Because what I'm trying to do is really just for context as well as I want to just grow myself on YouTube and hope everything comes from that. That's what I'm trying to do, like grow myself on YouTube and hope everything kind of ties in together. So my first book, Every Last Psycho, published this in 2018, and this is basically young adults. So when I say young adult fiction, it's
I love
fiction
the
that's
cover.
usually aimed young adult fiction is usually fiction aimed at young people, but it can cover any what's the word uh like anyone can read it, but it's usually like aimed or about teenagers. So yeah, this is
What's
about
the log line?
contains two novellas, and one novella is called Every Lost Thought. It's about a girl who has schizophrenia. The other one is called Psycho Girl, and it's about a girl who's a psychopathic murderer. And
One.
yeah, I combined the two. Yeah. So then I also have I'll just do them in publication order. Artist's Waste of Time, also published 2018. This is a poetry book. The original cover was actually blue, but I changed it. I just like this better. And yes, general poetry. It's kind of like coming of age poetry. It's kind of like I wrote them kind of poems comprised from when I was in my teens and since my early 20s. This is Anne. It's a coming of age novel that actually won an award 2 years ago. And it's about a girl who grows up in a household full of domestic violence.
Sorry,
And
you're gonna you'll get to talk about Anne in a bit, but this comment just made me laugh. Yeah, sorry.
maybe.
The latest book.
Yeah. So yeah, Anne. Yeah, this is probably one of my favorites actually. Yeah, I do love this novel. It's about a girl. She goes through a lot of personal hardships. Goes to boarding school. Her dad's an alcoholic and beats her mother. Yeah, very intense book. Um,
Yeah,
what
you
else?
mentioned your. Oh, there's another one. I thought Anne was the latest one.
No, I have six. I have six books under my name, but I also write romance as
Yeah.
well. I've published a lot of books. I've been doing this for a while. So this I published so yeah, Anne and this one I published in 2019. This is another poetry book.
Single broke female.
It's actually a reference to a movie called Single White Female. Yeah, it's just a funny film reference. Nobody gets the
Alright.
reference, but I get it, and I can just laugh at people. Just find things funny. Where's my other one around midnight? Around midnight. This is about a crowdfunded some real life. Yeah,
Sorry.
maybe. But I think it's nice. It's a tone, isn't it?
That's the funniest. That one's coming
It's a nice
today. I'm not
tone.
gonna lie.
I mean, it started off quite bright. I actually have
It
a
did.
lamp. I just thought, like, because your lighting is dark and mine's dark, so I just thought it looks kind of cool. Oh no, now we're not matching anymore. Why would you do that?
Wait.
Put it back.
No, we can.
We need to be matching. We need to be
Okay, yeah,
matching.
let's skip it.
Yeah. So around midnight, this is another young adult fiction novel about. Is that my thumbprints? That's creepy. Yeah, this is about a girl who's a saxophonist who meets a rather abusive guy. It's actually kind of based on one relationship I had when I was younger. My latest novel, Tic Tac Toe, which I mentioned at Speaker's Corner. This is basically criticizing all of the kind of woke feminism, trans. Yeah, this is my latest. I published it just a few months ago. I love this book. This book for me is really, really good. I really want it to be as widely read as possible in the next like year or two.
Bring it closer to the.
Yeah. If anyone's gonna read any book of mine, read this because this is really for everyone. It's like this is basically showing the logical endpoint of everything. This is like where we're headed, you know. Yeah, it's a big one.
I echo the sentiment.
Yeah, all self-published. I don't really promote them, not because I don't want to, but because it's just all a slog. I just kind of think it's just a bit all over the place, really, because you self-publish, so you kind of have to do everything yourself. So my whole thing is, I actually had an author YouTube channel, which I don't really post on at the moment, but.
Speaking of YouTube, this is what we're gonna end on. We're gonna end on your most recent viral moment on a very famous.
Oh yeah, we'll end on that in a minute. But yeah, so it was my books. I was hoping to grow on like YouTube with my books, and then I thought the anti-feminist stuff it's really relevant, and because Tic Tac Toe is is criticizing feminism, it goes into a lot of concepts. But yeah, so that's what I really was kind of hoping to do. Push, do the anti-feminism stuff, start to grow on YouTube, and then hopefully everything ties in together. So that's Pearl, Pearly, just Pearly Moron. That's my new name for her.
Yeah, so Just Pearly thing is a famous. Is she a red pill? Is that what she is? Is she the red pill community? YouTube?
She's not really anything. She's just she started off as like an anti-feminist, woman. She'd kind of talk about the problems of feminism and men's rights activism, but then now she just basically has this big chat show where she just brings in women and makes fun of them and puts them down, and she basically just wants to say, oh yeah, all modern women are trashy and terrible because they're not virgins. She's awful. I'm biased because she kicked me off her show recently, but yeah, no, you could say she's a kind of anti-feminist / red pill influencer.
Yeah, I'll say she is an anti-feminist, and you are also an anti-feminist. But the distinction is that she's also anti-women, and you're not.
Basically, yeah, she's basically. I would class her as. I wouldn't say she's a misogynist. Yeah, manosphere grifter, very, very good use of term. Actually, a lot of people in the manosphere, because I've watched a lot of videos about her. A lot of men in the manosphere and the red pill spaces don't like her. To Marcy, the kind of original, or the rational male, and the kind of original father of a lot of red pill stuff. Because I think the red pill started off quite good as kind of a social reaction to feminism, and it was all about men trying to empower men. It started off good, but now it's really become basically misogyny. Well, it is a lot of it, and what Pearl is pushing is misogyny. It's like all she does is basically crap on women. she's really, really obsessed with virginity. I think this is really, really messed up. Like, if you go on her Twitter profile, all she says on men want to marry, men prefer virgins, men should have virginity as a wife. And she's got this obsession. And what's really funny is that she's not a virgin and she's not married. Because I know Abby Shapiro, for example, she's like another big YouTuber, classically Abby. She talks about that, but she actually was virgin until marriage. So, and she's very religious. So I don't, she's not a hypocrite. But Pearl is not a virgin, and she's constantly obsessing about virginity. And I'm just like, for me, I don't know if it's because she's insecure or she's just so desperately obsessive, but it's like such a, because you're not a virgin, so why you just be yourself. It's like she can't take responsibility for her own sexual choices. Where have you gone? She can't take responsibility. There's so many things wrong
we
with
deserve your own screen for that, because
well, she is probably one of the worst people. Like, the first time I went on her show, I was really, really genuinely disgusted by a lot of the things she says. And because I knew I was going to go back, I was like, let me not talk too much about it. But now that, the second time I went on, she kicked me off. So now I'm like, okay, I'm free. That's what I like about her publicly.
And also, just for reference, she kicked you off not because you were being rude or being disrespectful. She kicked you off. I've seen the clip, and I might put it in the chat. You can put it in the chat if you want. She kicked you off because you challenged her, and she didn't like being challenged.
Yeah, basically. Because, for example, she makes up. Well, it's funny because in the video she kept on saying, she often brings up a lot of studies, and then at one point she was like, "Oh, but studies don't matter. You can get a stat to say anything. I think real life experience counts most." I'm like, well, Paul, in the real world, men are not as obsessed with virginity as you seem to think. And I can understand maybe some men thinking like that way, but a lot of men do not. Like, there are 4 billion men in the world. There are 4 billion men. We cannot.
Is your biggest issue with Pearl the virginity thing?
Pardon?
Is your biggest issue with Pearl the way she goes on about virginity?
Oh God, no. There's so many problems with her. First of all, she's doing a horrible disservice to people who are actual anti-feminists or men's rights activists, because she's almost making it into like a joke, and she's using her platform to basically make all of us supposedly on her side look bad, because she looks so terrible. Because first of all, she's obviously a grifter. She doesn't really care about ending feminism. She doesn't really. I don't think she really cares about men's rights. I don't think she cares about helping women or helping people. I think that she only really cares about stirring up drama and about creating. She's sort of capitalizing on the contention and division between men and women right now, which makes her, in my eyes, no better than a feminist.
That's a good place to end. Zarina,
yeah.
I hope we can do this again. This has been very fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, TLC, for surviving another British invasion. I don't know when the next one will be, but we'll be back. And just for a little bit of more context, yeah, if you were late, I played a clip earlier where Grim Greers gave me my mission, which was to go into London and come back to the little corner and share what I found. And Zarina represents a rising voice I can see amongst women, where feminism has sort of run its course, and there's a new thirst for men and women to work together in a more productive way. And I think she hopefully explained that well. Thank you all, and God save the king.